Here we are in the berry patch. So what we're going to be pruning and training today are triple crown thornless blackberries, which is a vining type of blackberry. So for vining blackberries, you use a 2-wire trellis. And you have one wire at approximately 3 feet high and the other at approximately 5 feet high, with the posts spaced 20 feet apart. For an upright grower, really you only need a 1-wire trellis, and in that case, it would just support the flora canes when they've got fruit on them from flopping out. Okay, so in this first year plant, the basic goal here is really to attach it to the trellis. And I like to use a plant-based homegrown plant tie, and this is Yucca filamentosa, a southeastern native plant that has long fibers on it, so it makes a really nice tie. You can also use any kind of string that's biodegradable. I wouldn't really recommend plastic string or wire ties or anything along those kind of lines. So we're going to take a little bit of that, and when you're tying it, you want to make sure that that runner is not too tightly wrapped, because if you do, then it'll restrict the growth on it in the following year. So I'm just going to take this, wrap it around a little bit so this vine will be up here, but it won't be too tight, and there's plenty of room for that stem to expand the way I tied this up. And then I'm going to take it and just wrap it around the top wire a little bit. Then the last thing I'm going to do is pinch the tips out. I call it tip nipping. And that'll encourage these lateral buds that are at the base of each of these leaves to send out lateral shoots. And the more lateral shoots you have, the more fruit you're going to get. The more stems you've got, the more places there are for flowers, and the more fruit you're going to get. So we're going to just continue that process. This one's really not quite long enough, and hopefully we'll get enough growth that we'll be able to actually tie this on up to the top wire before the season's done. Now this one, we may not have to tie up if we can just give it a nice wrap. And once again, tip nip it when we're done. And I don't think that's going to wrap and hold. Yes, it did. We can also attach some of these to this lower trellis wire as well, if we choose to. This one rooted into the ground a little bit. There's some live roots on here, and this is a really easy way to propagate more plants at no cost to you. So I'm just going to go ahead and nip that off, and we'll set this aside, and if you have any plants that die in the orchard or anything like that, you can come back and replace them with this. You can put it in a pot, you can give it to your friends, whatever you want to do. But this is a whole nother plant. It's good to go. And this one needs a little bit of tying up. There we go. So that's about all we need to do on this plant until it's grown a little bit more. Okay, let me just find a good plant that we can do some things with. Here's a good one. You can see this is really a vigorous plant here. What we've done prior to this point, and is about midsummer and early to mid-July, we went in and did a lot of tip nipping on these new Prima canes, and got a lot of lateral branching going on here. And now, over a period of about a month, this plant has grown this much. So they have a lot of vigor. Now, one of the reasons that we've got so much vigor on these has been regular fertilization. We've used an organic fertilizer, just a blended organic fertilizer, about 3 times over the course of the season, starting in early spring and the last fertilization being in early July. The other critical factor to these plants' success had to do with adding the right minerals in, rock phosphate, green sand, at the time of planting, into the planting hole. And the third thing, and this is one of the major limiting factors for thornless blackberries, is water. So in the establishment of this blackberry patch, we put in drip irrigation. They're on a really simple irrigation timer that cuts on twice a week for half an hour. So these plants are well mulched so that water is really getting into the root zone well and not evaporating away. And we're giving them, each plant, about a gallon of water twice a week. So this becomes important. It's particularly important to make sure that blackberry plants aren't lacking for water when they're ripening fruit. So the next thing that we're going to do is continue to work with these Prima canes to get them onto the trellis. There are a number of different ways of doing this. You can extend the stems along the top of each of these trellis wires, or the other thing that you can do is very gently flex them and wrap them over and back down. And I'm going to just nip that tip right off of it. These are wonderful plants to work with. We're anticipating that these plants will put on about 8 quarts of berries per plant. You know, that's like 100 gallons of berries from 50 plants. So we've cleaned up this side of the plant. There are a few more laterals on the other side as well. Let's see what we can do with them. It's so delightful working with thornless blackberries because they don't have any thorns. It's not like going to war to harvest your fruit. Come home with your shirts all ripped up and battered and bloodied from trying to get yourself some good nutrition. And a little tip nip there. Okay, so that's the basic process of dealing with the Prima canes. Now, blackberries have 2 types of canes on them that basically depend on their age. They're the Prima canes, which is the first year growth. They will then flower and fruit the second year. And the second year canes are called flora canes, obviously because they'll flower. And you remove that cane completely down to the ground after fruiting is done to make room for the next year's flora canes to go ahead and grow. So we want to remove the flora canes after they finish producing berries. And these things just wound up, about a week ago. Here's another one kind of sprawling along the ground. You can see the diameter on these canes at the base. Oh, good ½ inch in diameter canes. Those are all the Prima canes. So these things have really grown this year. So after we're done pruning out the orchard, we want to not leave these old flora canes in the orchard, because that's the way disease can spread through your orchard. So you want to gather these up. And it looks like we had a little bit of some aphids or something on there. But you want to gather these up and you want to burn them or otherwise dispose of them. Probably not compost them, because there's some risk that diseases could be spread. Or if you are composting, make it a good distance away from your blackberry patch. So the next pruning that these plants will need after you nip them back a little bit would be in late winter, after the worst of the cold weather is over. So end of February, very 1st of March, you'd come back in here and prune any of these laterals that have developed on these main stems back to about 12 inches apiece. Another thing I really like about blackberries is it's not like a fruit tree that you have to wait for a number of years to get maximum production. Within 2 years, these plants can be in full production. You know, so they're really a wonderful fruit on all levels. One of my very favorite useful plants. Oh yeah!